talk about, you use MCT and coconut oil, right? So it's like as separate things, but coconut oil is 60% MCT. Can you talk a little bit about what are in the two? Why do you use both? And do you need both, or can just one?
Yeah. So the main reason I used coconut oil in the beginning is, I knew what MCT oil was, and I thought, well, this may be available in hospitals, but I didn't know that it was available on the shelf. And so I had gotten coconut oil. And so in a way, that was kind of a good fluke, that had happened. And he improved so much just with coconut oil. I was afraid to stop the coconut oil, and just do MCT oil, because I thought there might be much more to this than just the ketones. And one of the his Dr. Veitch's associates, Dr. Theodore Van Italy, he was in his 90s at that point. He wrote the foreword to my third book at 99, age 99. But he said he strongly believed that there might be something else in coconut oil as well. So he encouraged me to keep using it. And it turns out that there is something else. There are other things in coconut oil that are beneficial. Half of the fat in coconut oil is a medium chain triglyceride called lauric acid, LAURIC, or C12, it's also called. And MCT oil is C8 and C10. It's two other fatty acids that are also in coconut oil, but all the other stuff that's in coconut oil is not in MCT oil usually. And because it's refined, it's distilled, and they take the fatty acids and they completely separate it. But lauric acid and coconut oil, since all of this happened with Steve, one thing, there was a company in Japan, the Nishin Oilio company, and they were very interested in finding out why coconut oil could help Steve so much, because the levels of ketones from coconut oil were measured by Dr. Veitch and, in Steve, and then with MCT oil, and the levels were higher with MCT oil, which is why he wanted us to just focus on MCT oil. But this company in Japan, they studied basically astrocytes, which are cells in the brain that nourish the neurons. And they found that lauric acid potently stimulates ketone production directly in astrocytes, which are these brain cells. And so they believe that, that it might not just be how much ketone is in your blood, but the fact that this fatty acid can directly cause ketones to be produced in astrocytes that are brain cells, that may have explained why my husband would, and other people that were taking coconut oil at that point, would improve so much. They did the study in 2016, and by then I had collected hundreds of reports from people, that say they had improved, with coconut oil and or MCT oil at that point. And the other medium chains do too. The C8, C10 that's in MCT oil stimulate ketones in astrocytes. The MCT oil is used very quickly, and lauric acid levels tend to stay very high in the blood for a long time, for hours and hours. And they believe, this research group in Japan, that that the high elevation of the lauric acid in the blood gives it more opportunity to, I guess, have time to produce these ketones in the brain, that it has more time to get into the brain, more likely to get into the brain and do this. It hasn't been proven yet in animals, so it yet to be determined, but it kind of makes sense. And then another cool thing about lauric acid is it's very antimicrobial. It kills all kinds of viruses, bacteria, fungus, protozoa, and this has been studied for years and years. And lauric acid is actually extracted from coconut oil to use as disinfectant. It's in like these disinfectant wipes and sprays. They add sulfate to it. It's sodium lauryl sulfate, or there's other names for it. But you'll see the ingredients in these disinfectants, basically, and it's extracted from lauric acid. But when you eat it, part of it's converted to, it's called monolaurin, and it's been tested repeatedly, shown to kill so many different types of bacteria. And the thing why that's important is that there's a ton of research, hundreds of studies of different organisms that have been connected to possibly causing Alzheimer's, triggering it, accelerating it, somehow contributing to Alzheimer's disease. And lauric acid, happens to kill many of those organisms that have been studied. For example, one of them is herpes simplex virus, and which a lot of people get fever blisters on their mouth, and they may get somewhere else, on their fingers, or and people in the studies, there are like well over 200 studies of herpes simplex virus and Alzheimer's that looks pretty good that it has some connection. And then the shingles virus too is also in the herpes family. And there's some newer studies showing that, having a shingles vaccine can also trigger eruptions of this herpes simplex virus. And potentially, there's associations of that with developing dementia later. People that get shingles have a higher risk of developing dementia. So lauric acid kills both of those viruses. So if you eat it, regularly, you'll have lauric acid, and this can help suppress, potentially these infections. And it also kills, lauric acid kills these spirochetes that cause dental decay, tooth decay, and that's also been associated with Alzheimer's. And you can swish it in your mouth. They call it oil pooling, but you put it in your mouth for 10 minutes, work it around in your mouth, and then spit it out. And this can help, control gingivitis and plaque formation. That there are studies showing that. For my husband, he had constant fever blisters. He was just always, he had a big fat fever blister on his lip, that would last for 10 days, that would go away for a week, and would come back. And I mean, this was over and over and over for years. And he had an infection around his eye, blisters that look very similar to fever blisters when he was 29. And he said he never felt quite the same after that. So, that's kind of led me to start looking at this possibility of infection in Alzheimer's. And he rarely ever had another fever blister after we started coconut oil. And so I felt like the lauric acid was controlling possibly an infection in his brain that could have allowed him to improve, over time, if it was controlling an infection. So that's why we kept the coconut oil. And we kept the MCT oil, use that because the levels of ketones were higher from it. They are higher when you take MCT oil. So, and that was important too, to provide as much fuel as possible to his brain. So that's, I thought, let's just mix them. And I started playing with different ratios and to see how well that two oils would work together. And I came up with, it was a ratio of like 4 parts MCT to 3 parts coconut oil. So you would mix it like 4 ounces of, or 120 mLs of MCT oil to 3 ounces or 90 mLs of coconut oil. And it stays liquid at room temperature. It doesn't separate. You store it at room temperature. Both of these oils have at least a 2-year shelf life when you buy it fresh. And you can use it like in salad, and I put it in yogurt, you can use it in coffee, there's just so many different things, soup, or, whatever you're making, put it on vegetables. So it's real easy to incorporate it into your diet. And you just use it in place of other types of fats and oils, and reducing carbohydrates. I think reducing the carbohydrate as much as possible is really important too, because of this problem with insulin resistance. The reason that we've gotten to this big problem with so many people having insulin resistance is likely related to how much sugar we've been eating, especially here in the US. And unfortunately, that's gotten out to other parts of the world. They kind of adopt a US diet and start buying foods, that come from the US, all these processed foods that are very high. They have high fructose corn syrup, they're very high in sugar. very high in salt, and use fatty acids that might not be so good. Like there were a lot of trans fats in foods, for years and years. And I don't know about where you are, but they finally kind of phased them out here in the US. I mean, it's still allowed up to a half a gram a serving of trans fat, but it used to be, I had a lipid researcher friend who told me that there were 25 grams of trans fat in from a fast food restaurant, just a medium serving of their fries, that it had 25 grams of trans fat. And it was phased out because it was found to be very harmful to the heart. They're stiff, and they get into cell membranes. They shorten the life of the cell. They make the cell less fluid. They interfere with what goes in and out of our cells. And they were attributing at least 30,000 heart attacks a year in the US to eating trans fats. So that's why they decided to phase them out.
That sounds good.
I talk too much, don't I?
No, so